Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week. Bernie, AOC, Mandani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing.
If you've ever watched the Democratic Party flirt a little too hard with socialism, this is basically that moment when your friend yells, "Don't text your ex," and you do it anyway. Bill Maher just unleashed another rant, this time aimed straight at AOC, Bernie Sanders, and Zoran Mamdani. And he's not just annoyed, he's running a full-on political intervention. Maher, a Democrat since basically the Stone Age, now sounds like the sober designated driver watching his friends slam tequila shots at 2 in the morning. He's looking at AOC and her rising socialist protege, Mamdani, practically begging them to stop before this ends badly. Stop. For the love of political survival, just stop. Of course they're not listening. They're doubling down. AOC recently fired back at her critics, Maher included, with the usual "you just need to get to know him" routine. You know the line. Just meet the guy. He's great once you're in the same room. It's basically political Tinder. Swipe right on socialism and hope something works out. Here's the twist. AOC suddenly calls for open minds and face-to-face talks. Yet, she rarely offers that same grace to Donald Trump or most conservatives. Now she's the queen of listening, which feels either deeply ironic or a masterclass in selective empathy. Even moderates in her own party are raising their eyebrows so high they're almost in orbit.
What do you say to the skeptics, though, in the party who want to keep him at arm's distance, some who have some problems with him, even some fellow New Yorkers in the swing districts outside the city?
Get to know him. Get to know him. You know, this is not about having any kind of hard line. I think that if anybody is skeptical, I would say get to know him. And once you get into a room with him, kick the tires yourself and make your own assessment instead of just kind of making assessments from what you may see on television. If you have the ability to meet someone in person, you should meet them before you judge.
And Maher, oh, he is not holding back. He goes straight to one of his favorite comparisons, capitalist South Korea versus socialist North Korea. One side at night glows like Times Square, the other looks like someone forgot to pay the power bill. Then he shifts to Venezuela, a country that was once richer than Poland, but after embracing 21st century socialism, it spiraled into shortages, inflation, economic collapse, and a mass exodus. Basically, the textbook is a hit of failed economic experiments. His message? Clearly, socialism doesn't magically work just because you're in a big coastal city. Meanwhile, Mamdani isn't promising free unicorns. He's young, charismatic, full of energy, and pushing policies that many say historically sink economies. But instead of cheering on the excitement, Maher looks around the Democratic Party like, hello? Anyone else seeing this? Are we sleepwalking into 2028 blindfolded? AOC insists critics should just go meet him. Maher says fine, then meet history because history has never lost its socialism without failing spectacularly. And then Maher zeroes in on Bernie Sanders. For decades, Bernie's big fight has been single-payer healthcare for all 340 million Americans. But when his own home state of Vermont tried a version of it for just about 626,000 people, it reportedly collapsed faster than, well, the recent Oval Office chaos. So his point is, if Vermont couldn't make it work, why would anyone think New York could?
I know the kids think that stuff that happened before their appearance on the planet didn't really happen, but it did. We've run this experiment many times, and the results are always obvious. Here's capitalist South Korea at night from space. Here's socialist North Korea. Yeah. In 1990, Venezuela was wealthier than Poland, but then Poland, finally free of Soviet-style economics, went all in on capitalism. And now their economy is as big as Japan. And people there have high wages, low inflation, cars, vacations, home.
Maher keeps pounding the point. Bernie Sanders, AOC, and Zoran Mamdani aren't really Democrats. They're democratic socialists, a whole different breed. And they'll tell you that themselves. No apologies, no excuses.
Meanwhile, Venezuela traded capitalism for Hugo Chavez's Socialism for the 21st Century, which turned out to be like socialism in the last century, or any century, a mess. It turned one of Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in for a rude awakening.
The problem, Maher argues, is that most voters don't even see the brand confusion. But his hardest-hitting line, the very politicians railing against capitalism owe their fame and platforms to the system they love to bash. Bernie's books, AOC's brand deals, their massive social media followings, their public influence, none of that would exist under real socialism. In a true socialist system, you don't become a superstar by criticizing it. Instead, the system critiques you, and then, just like that, you vanish.
This election is taking place when we have an administration in Washington which every day is moving us toward an authoritarian society.
This is America, New York City. Don't let them tell you any different. Don't let them tell you that we are the exception. We are the rule. And we set the bar for America. I'm talking to you, Donald Trump.
Let our words ring out so loud tonight that Andrew Cuomo can hear them in his $8,000 a month apartment. New York is not for sale.
And that's the contradiction Maher finds utterly exhausting. The people shouting that capitalism is broken are the very ones thriving under it. Now, none of this means capitalism is perfect. Maher admits it's messy, uneven, and often infuriating. But compared to socialism, with its near 100% failure rate, capitalism starts to feel like the stable partner in a toxic relationship. You know the TikTok ones. One partner brings chaos, the other quietly pays the bills. Capitalism is the steady, reliable partner. Socialism? The ex who swears they've changed while holding a gas can. Then Maher shifts to newly elected Virginia Representative Abigail Spanberger, who warned years ago that if Democrats didn't move back toward the center, they'd implode. Her advice was simple: stop using the word socialist. Moderates win elections. Extremists grab headlines, not victories. And guess what? She won, not by channeling Che Guevara, but by not doing so. Did the party listen? Of course not. They tossed her advice straight into the ideological recycling bin. This is where Maher gets that disappointed dad look. The Democratic Party isn't being guided by its moderates, it's being dragged by its fringes. The loudest, flashiest voices are often more representative of Twitter than actual voters. Promoting candidates with radical agendas isn't leadership, he argues. It's political Russian roulette. Only instead of one bullet in the chamber, there are four.
Now, Mendami seems like a nice guy, and I congratulate him on an extraordinary political achievement. But before the whole left side of the country catches socialism fever, let's listen to the other big winner in last Tuesday's election, Virginia Governor-elect Abigail Spanberger, who, before the 24 election, said things like, "If the party didn't shift to the center, we will get torn apart. And we need to never use the word socialist or socialism ever again." Well, she was right, but they didn't listen. Typical, am I right, ladies?
And the silence from the moderate majority is deafening. That silence isn't neutral, it's permission. When a party refuses to rein in its extremes, those extremes don't just influence the party, they become the party. Meanwhile, the data is screaming from every corner. In 2024, 13 Democrats won in districts Trump carried, all moderates. Not a single Democratic socialist among them. Think tanks analyzed the results and came to the same conclusion, again and again: move to the center. Even the New York Times, the so-called cathedral of liberal thought, admitted the extremists were wrong and the middle path was the winning strategy. But did the DNC course correct? Of course not. They treated that advice like a blender, tossed it in, and chugged a chaos smoothie. Moderates are being ignored, while socialist messaging is being doubled down on. The party isn't just stepping back from capitalism, they're quietly flirting with socialism, sending it texts like, "Hey, you up?
At least the party has a clear choice here, very clear. One wing, is saying don't ever use the word socialist again, and one is saying,
I am a democratic socialist.
clear, huh? So how do we decide who's right? Well, it turns out we don't really have to flip a coin. We have the evidence. In 2024, 13 Democrats won in districts Trump also won, all moderates. This isn't rocket science. All the left-leaning think tanks have done autopsies on 2024, and they all came up with the same message: move to the center.
Maher warns that putting ideology ahead of electability is a surefire way to lose elections. He notes that the DNC's biggest defeats came when they went all in on woke theateristics, symbolic crusades, and fringe priorities.
Even the New York Times, which did so much to promote woke politics, now says the partisans are wrong. Moving to the center is the way to win. And Democrats should recognize the party moved too far left on social issues after Obama left office.
Voters aren't looking for a political TikTok performance. They want competence, balance, and confidence that a party isn't being run by people who think Twitter is reality. And Maher is right. Americans on the left, right, and center aren't clamoring for revolution. They want stability. They don't want socialism. They want solutions. Yet the DNC keeps acting like the friend who ignored every red flag and still asks, why do I keep dating toxic people? Maher drives home one final massive point. Socialism doesn't just fail quietly, it fails spectacularly. It doesn't slowly fizzle out, it crashes hard. History is full of these experiments, and the pattern is almost always the same: shortages, runaway inflation, economic collapse, and mass exodus. Just look at Venezuela, where nearly 8 million people have fled amid a severe economic and humanitarian crisis, a level of migration larger than many wartime displacements. So when AOC claims New York is the rule, not the exception, Maher flips it. If that's true, then brace yourselves. If the rule is socialism, the outcome won't be prosperity, it will be collapse. Then he circles back to Bernie's home state of Vermont, because the comparison is hard to ignore. On paper, single-payer healthcare looks fantastic. In speeches, it sounds inspiring. But when Vermont tried to build its own statewide system, known as Green Mountain Care, officials abandoned the plan before it was ever implemented, after realizing the tax increases and financing needed would have been huge and potentially disruptive. Costs were projected so high that the governor concluded it wasn't feasible at the time, citing the risk of economic disruption from heavy tax hikes and financing challenges. So Maher asks, if Vermont couldn't make it work with all the conditions stacked in its favor, how is New York, a massive, complex, expensive metropolis, supposed to succeed?
Zoran can't make your wishes come true. You're thinking of Zoltar. Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week.
Maher's final message is unflinching. Democratic socialism looks great in theory, like a dating profile full of airbrushed photos and inspirational quotes. But meet it in the real world, and the consequences tell a very different story. And that story almost always ends with economic crisis. As he wraps up, Maher drives home the point he's been hammering for years. America doesn't want fringe ideology. Americans want pragmatism, competence, and common sense. If the DNC hopes to win in 2028, or ever again, they need to stop chasing ideological purity and start appealing to the voters who actually decide elections. But will they? Or will they keep ignoring moderates and swiping right on political disaster? Only time will tell. That brings us to the end of today's commentary. If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit like, subscribe for more deep dives, and drop a comment sharing where you think the Democratic Party is headed. Is this just a temporary detour into ideological fantasy, or a long-term shift that could cost them everything? Let me know below.